Hi everyone, hope you're all doing well, and today we're going to talk about this 2021 stock market crash. So this year has been quite an awful year for stocks. Now if you look at the big tech or the indexes, some of them look pretty good going, but outside of that it has been very ugly for the stock market. And we're going to talk about that in general, what is the cause of that, what's going to happen going forward, and my kind of plan going forward with the whole situation. Now last week was actually a really interesting week because we actually had some of the stocks outside of the indexes, some stocks outside of the big tech actually put in a bit of a decent week, but then it got to Thursday and Friday and they did kind of sell off again. So we'll see where this week kind of takes us, but in general, from a long point of view, I want to talk about 2021 because it has been quite an ugly year for the stock market outside of the big tech. And people often talk about stock market crashes, when a stock market crash is going to happen, and this definitely has the feel of a stock market crash. It's never going to get recognized as a stock market crash because you look at the indexes aren't down 20+%. A lot of the big tech isn't down 20+%, but you look outside of that big tech, you look outside of the big tech that is propping up a lot of these indexes, you will find a lot of stocks near 52-year close. You will find a lot of stocks down 20%. I think I was just looking a little bit earlier, and like the likes of like Disney, I believe Disney is now down like over 20%. And that's not anything really, you wouldn't class that as a growth stock, and that's another stock that is down 20%. So there's a lot of buying opportunities from stocks that you would have said were a lot more higher risk, and a lot more stocks that are probably non-profit stocks. But you're even seeing the likes now of very big recognized big blue chip stocks that are down 20+% right now. So there's a lot of buying opportunities out there in the stock market. So kind of where did we get into this position where we had a 2021 outside of the indexes where it's not great, is it? It's a little bit awful. Well, I guess the kind of start of it was the start of 2021. When we came in from 2020, we had a whole stock market. It was very hard to lose money in the stock market. Pretty much everything was up in 2020. Everything was moving in the right directions. Big tech, the whole of the S&P, growth stocks, and it just kept moving up and up. And I think at some point when we kind of crossed that 2020 into the 2021 period, there just was a little bit of hype there going through the months of January, February, maybe March time. I think them 3 months in particular, there was just a lot of hype there, and I think people got a bit carried away. And the big thing is, what you'll see people quite often do is when we have these sort of stock markets that go up and up and up, people are like, oh yeah, it just keeps going up, we're just going to keep putting like loads of money in. And people see the people that aren't very successful in the stock market tend to buy a lot of these stocks when they keep going up and up to crazy valuations. And those are the people that buy at crazy valuations, and then it goes down and they go, oh, what's just kind of happened? And it's the same sort of logic when actually stocks go completely down and fall off a cliff. You'd think people would be thinking, oh, that's now lost half its value, and we're actually going to pile in there. These are, it's half the value of what it was 12 months ago. This should be a really good buying opportunity. But then people actually, investors get emotional, and that fear of, but it might just keep going lower. And so what if it's getting lower? You've just lost half the value of what it was, and it's now at a good valuation. But people, the mindset doesn't work like that. Really, when it's going down, you should be buying. But unfortunately, a lot of investors and a lot of people buy, they don't win in the stock market, is because then they buy when it's actually going up. And that's the reason why people aren't very successful in the stock market. And at the start of the year, we had a lot of that. We had stocks that just kept going up and up, and people were just hyping up a lot of stocks. And there was just money going crazy, stocks that had basically like no product, no revenue at all. Anything was going up. You saw the like rise of penny stocks basically as well, and all that sort of stuff. So basically, start 2021 was a lot of hype. So you had basically everything shoot up, money just going flying in. You had just a lot of stocks getting to crazy valuations that were, what they should be valued probably in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years time. There's stocks at crazy valuations, so there needed to be that reset in the stock market for sure. Now what has happened is that you have started this year, from about that time, is you have had the valuations reset and come back down to decent valuations. But the only thing is that you look at the S&P 500, the S&P 500 is still going up and up. And now in my opinion, I look at the S&P 500 and think it's an absolute crazy valuations, and there's not a crash being recognised, even though a lot of valuations are resetting. It's not recognised in the indexes because the indexes keep going up. Now, why did the indexes keep going up? Well, because you have big tech. big tech is propping up the stock market. So basically there's only, because a lot of these big tech basically make up, 20-30% of these indexes. These indexes look like they're flying up, but it's only them kind of 5 big companies that are propping up these indexes. Outside of them 5 big tech stocks propping up this stock market, everything else has had that correction in value. And a lot of these stocks, like I said earlier, are down 20, 30, 40, 50%. Some are even more than 50%. Like I said, I think some of them are probably deserving of that correction. I think some of them are now a little bit crazy, which we'll talk about in a second. But big tech, because they haven't had that correction, is not being recognised in them indexes. Now, in my opinion, big tech will have to have that correction. It will either have to flatline for a little bit, or it'll have to pull back. Because I look at the likes of Microsoft, and I'm a shareholder in Microsoft. I've been a shareholder in Microsoft since 2017. The likes of Apple, the likes of Facebook a little bit, Nvidia, Shopify. Shopify is one that I've owned since the start of the year, the last big tech that I bought. Done fantastic this year. I'm up like 40-50% on Shopify. It's had a very good year. Probably a little bit overvalued, and I'm a shareholder of that, saying that. And I'm looking at myself that owns, my best performing stocks this year, and I'm looking at them going, they are, crazily overvalued right now, and they will have to have a flat line, or they'll have to pull back at some point. But at the moment they're not doing. So while you have all these indexes up, and because of the weighting of these indexes, the big tech are keeping them up there, outside of that, if you look, there's plenty of stocks down at 52-week close right now. And like I said, there's multiple stocks down 50%. Some fantastic stocks. Don't get me wrong, there's some stocks in there that you look at and go, that's probably the valuation it was at was absolutely nuts. It's probably due the pullback. But at what point do you start going, okay, that's a bit too much now? Do you look at a stock that's might have done amazing financials, maybe a bit overvalued? Okay, it has a 10% pullback, 20% pullback, 30%, 40%, 50%. There's got to be a line somewhere where you look at a lot of these stocks that are pulling back, and you've got to realise that there's probably one of these stocks here that's probably keeps selling off, that it's probably a bit too much here, and it's probably a bit oversold here. And the thing as well is, what has especially happened is in the last kind of 3 months, or particularly in the month of November and December, you've seen a lot of these stocks take their massive nosedive in the last kind of 1 or 2 months. A lot of people are saying this is because of tax purposes, and that's why they're selling them. But in particular, you've got a lot of stocks that have lost a lot of these values in 1 or 2 months. And that's the screaming thing, that it starts being a bit of an overreaction. When you look at, okay, maybe a stock kind of steadily downtrends, but when you have that drop off, which quite a few stocks have in the last kind of 3 months, is if you have a stock that drops off and loses 20-30% of its value in 3 months, that's nothing to do with how the company's performing. There's no company really, unless there was a shocking piece of news come out like Zillow, for example. But if there hasn't really been that much news that fundamentally changes the company, you've got to be looking at a few of these stocks and going, that one's just lost like 20-30% in 1 month. That's probably worth a look into. That could be an overreaction here, because there's probably nothing that justifies it to drop that much. And you might be able to be looking at some of these opportunities now and thinking they're good buying opportunities. And what I'm doing now with this 2021 stock market crash, that will never get shown off as an actual crash, because you have the indexes that are doing well, you have the big tech that's lifting it up, but outside of that, you have so many stocks that have crashed a huge amount, and you have a vast majority to go through. Whether or not you want to be growth or even value picks right now, there's plenty of stocks out there for you to be looking at, and you want to be looking now at a lot of these stocks that, in my opinion, there's a lot of oversold stocks out there. There's a lot of stocks that have lost 20, 30, 40, 50% of the value. And like I was just saying a little bit earlier, there's no way that with a lot of these stocks that keep going lower, there's a point where a lot of these stocks, you'll be looking at a lot of them going, this is oversold now. There might be some stocks that have had, a bit of a rich valuation or an okay valuation, but there's going to be a line in a lot of these stocks. There's going to be a line where there's a point where it sells off 20%. Okay, is it undervalued now? 30, 40, 50%. A lot of these stocks will have a line where you look at these stocks that keep going down, and you will look and think, they've done okay financially this year, and then you've lost 50%. This could be a massive buying opportunity right now. And the big thing now is to be looking out for, going into 2021, 2022, is to be staring out for these amazing opportunities that are massively sold off. And when you're looking at a lot of these stocks, for example, if you see a stock that was originally 40 billion at the start of the year, and now it's valued at 20 billion, potentially if you're a long-term investor, you'll be looking at a lot of these companies, even if you bought at 40 million, potentially you're looking at a lot of these companies now and thinking, I can see this being 100 billion stock in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. If you can see that, even if you bought at 40 billion, you're still going to be okay. That's the great thing about being a long-term investor, is that even if you do kind of overpay for a company, as long as it's going to be a great company that will carry on growing its revenue and profit, sure, you might not be making as much because you bought it at a bit of a high valuation, but the powerful thing of being a long-term investor and holding is that eventually it will kind of justify that valuation and then probably go even higher. But the really amazing thing now is that as an investor, as a long-term investor, the best way to make money, and any of you guys that went through the crash of 2020 around March time because of the CV situation, is when you see companies that were 40 billion and now at 20 billion, and you're like, it's lost half its value in like 3 months, and the financials are just improving. I can still see this being a 100 billion company in the next kind of 2, 3, 4, 5 years, maybe even longer. You could be getting an asset here that's lost half its value pretty much for no reason, pretty much nearly overnight. And as a long-term investor, these are some really good opportunities where you could make the maximum amount of money here. So even though it has been a bit of a stinker of a year outside of the big tech right now, there's so many opportunities out there where you'll be looking at a lot of companies that have lost half the value and they're screaming absolute buys. And like I said, the stock market's a funny thing because the stock market is the one thing that really puts into testing how much you know a company, how much you really have an understanding of that company and your belief in the company. And it's the only little thing where anywhere else in life, if you see something lose half its value, you're probably like jumping all over it going, oh, that's absolutely amazing, I want that. The stock market's the only thing where it actually does start questioning you a little bit and going, it's gone from 40 billion to 20 billion, do I really want to be buying that? It just keeps going down. When realistically, these as long-term investors, these are the opportunities that you really want to be buying. And like I said, long-term, you want to be looking at long-term. Maybe if it's 20 billion right now, while we're in this sort of stock market, while we're in this where there's so many stocks crashing in this stock market, it might be a stock market that pushes that stock down to 20 billion, 18 billion, 16 billion. But even that little percentage, if it just keeps going lower and lower, the great thing is that you can just hold. You can even buy a bit more, and it's all about the long-term game. It's all about investing for the long term. And I think especially with what hype has been caught up in here, a few people have got to the point of view where they have been like, oh yeah, I'm a long-term investor, and then they've been caught up in the hype of just buying everything and going, oh yeah, you know what, it'll actually double in the next kind of 12 months. And it's actually the reality now of like, okay, this is actually a test of like your game plan, how much you know the company. Are you willing to be a long-term investor? Can you hold it through these actual volatile dips? And right now, if you're actually a long-term investor and you're looking at some of these assets that have lost a huge amount of value, you're probably staring at a few of these going, these are really good buying opportunities for long term. And I've seen a few of these myself, a few stocks that I own at the moment. There's a few stocks that I bought that I thought were okay valuations, and since buying them, these stocks that I thought were okay valuations have now gone to cheap valuations. I'm sure you guys that watch the videos quite often will probably know which kind of stocks I'm talking about. There's a few stocks that I didn't buy at overvalued prices, but I admit I bought them at okay valuations. The reason why I bought them at okay valuations is because some of them I thought like were amazing opportunities, and I'm not going to try time the market. But now that I have these stocks from okay valuations down to massively undervalued valuations, I'm not complaining. I in the short term I might look a little bit of an idiot because I have that stock that I'm down 20% on, and sure, you might look a little bit of an idiot for the next kind of 6 months, 12 months. But what happens as a long-term investor is I'm not really investing for that period of time. I'm looking at these opportunities for where they will be in the longer term, and in the longer term, these assets that are a little bit down in the dumps right now, people will come back to these in the next kind of 3, 4, 5 years, and eventually what will happen is people will move out of these safe plays, the safe stocks at the moment, the stocks that a lot of investors are going to, which is the big tech. And for some reason, the stocks like Microsoft and Apple and all them sort of stocks that are at the craziest valuations they've ever been, the highest valuations that they have ever been at, and still keep putting money on them and invested into them instead of these stocks that are absolutely being down. At some point, that market rotation will happen from them, and it will happen. That is a stock market. I've been through this, and many other people have been through this, and will tell you that rotation will happen at some point. And there is it is not possible for this amount of amazing quality companies to stay at these prices down forever. At some point, these stocks will come back into favour and they will do very well. And that is the great thing as being a long-term investor, is looking at these assets and realising which of these assets have lost half the value and are going to be great investments in the long term. And right now, some of them are having a bit of reality check. Some of them went up on a lot of hype, but as well in there is some quality companies out there that will do very well. So yeah, I wanted to talk about this and talk about what is going on with this 2021 stock market crash that is a crash. You know, outside of the big tech, if you take them out of it, a lot of these indexes would have been down a huge amount this year. But outside of the indexes and the big tech that's propping up the stock market, there's a lot of stocks that have crashed a huge amount, and there's some amazing buying opportunities out there. And for a few people that are long-term investors and looking for a bargain, there's quite a few to pick from out there. So I thought I'd talk about this one today, and just a little bit of a pep talk before we go into the stock market week, I guess. I will talk about the stocks that I bought last week as well at some point as well. I'm also thinking about doing a video on potentially Beyond Meat and a bit of an update in that one, potentially a video on T-Doc at some point as well this week, just so you guys know what I'm kind of planning. But yeah, I thought I'd talk about this one anyway, guys, so I hope it was useful. Hit the like button if you're new, subscribe, and I'll see you next video.